So how did everyone love that?
It was great. It was good. We loved
Was it good?
Yeah,
125%.
It was just
Yes.
nice to be outside.
It was a beautiful day to be outside.
Yeah. Had the birdies singing and the river there.
But you were a little confronted at the beginning.
Yeah, I was afraid that I probably can't do it, but no,
You were afraid you couldn't, but you've never done it before.
no,
But you were afraid you couldn't do it.
yeah.
So one thing that you guys have to get that painting outdoors is like one of the hardest things you can possibly do. It is very, very complicated and very difficult. And so for those of you who have never done it before, congratulations, you made it through it.
Yeah, you have nothing to feel but feel.
You have nothing to fear. I don't know what it's like. People sometimes are so afraid of painting outdoors that they never conquer it. Now, the reality is this. Some people shouldn't paint outdoors because they don't like being outdoors. They don't like having bugs. They don't like being in the sun. They don't like the wind. You know, it can be dangerous in some places if you're out by yourself. Some people are very uncomfortable with that whole thing. It's good to have a group of people around when you actually do. But painting outdoors is probably the most rewarding of all the disciplines. It sure beats sitting in the studio isolated by yourself looking at a photograph. That, after a while, you can go crazy and start believing the conversations in your head. So you want to make sure that painting outdoors is done in a way that you're safe and that you enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, you never have to do it. In fact, painting outdoors is something that is more common now. It was quite common when I first started painting. We went out and painted outdoors, but in the last 5 years it kind of has really taken off. So plein air painting is really popular now. But for 30 years, nobody went outdoors to paint. I would go to the national parks, you can never see anybody painting. I would go travel, I would say, let's go paint outdoors, and everybody would say, are you crazy? There's bugs out there.
And wind and clouds and.
There's weirdos out there. But the chances are a lot of times when you're out there painting by yourself, you don't look that sexy. So people leave you alone.
Oh my goodness.
The only people who kind of come up is that they'll tap you on the shoulder and they'll go, are you painting outdoors? And it's like stating the obvious. And then they'll go, oh, you know what? My Aunt Martha paints. She paints really, really well. Do you know her? Martha Smith? I'm like, oh, no, I don't. Oh, by the way, what kind of tree is that out there? I don't know, I'm just painting. They expect you all of a sudden to be like a tour guide. But for the most part, people are kind of curious about the whole painting outdoors thing. But it's really hard. And one of the reasons why is every 7 minutes your model changes. Your light changes. Now, a lot of times what happens is when you go outdoors to paint, there's a lot of rules and regulations and things, but there's certain things that you kind of have to keep in mind. One of the things that a lot of people teach is to go do no-tones. And what they say is no-tones is really just a little preliminary sketch and a few values. The proper term of no-tones is actually a silhouette of black against black. It's like a repeating, so the yin-yang, the little swirly yin-yang sign, that's a no-tone. It's a duplication of the same object, and that's what a no-tone is.
Oh.
But artists have recently decided to take that on and call their little sketches no-tone sketches. And that's where you take like 4 separate colors of inks, and you sit and you draw little variations of what you want to paint before you start. And so you make
those tombow, those little tombow?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
that? And you can add water to it and,
You can, but a lot of them come in 4 colors. So you can have like black and then almost light gray to white and then 2 in between. And what you want to do when you set up for a plein air sketch, and that's what we're going to be doing, we'll give you a preliminary talk about that, is that you want to break your painting up into 4 simple shapes. Now, watching you outdoors is interesting because all of you have a different way and a different idea of what that is. A lot of you started drawing all this detail on those foreground trees. or even in the background, those trees that were really interesting back there. And the problems with that is if you draw all that in, you've got the landscape behind there that you have to get in. Now, most plein air painters don't put in the sky and then put in the trees. They actually work at the same time. So they'll put trees and sky in at the same time. Because once you get paint in the sky, you can't put a tree in front of it. So where the tree is, you kind of leave it blank. And then you paint in the sky, and then the tree, and then oftentimes you put a few burbles in. So that's a simple way of going. But in order to do that, you have to have an idea of your drawing and what you want to do. And so artists will say, well, go out and do some preliminary no-toms, which is 4 or 5 little sketches. And they call them thumbnail sketches because of the size of your thumb. So they'll be like 2 inches by 1 inch. And so a lot of workshops that you go to, they'll go, okay, we're going to do no-tom drawings. Chris just came back from a workshop where they did that. And so they're valuable things, but the problem is that you get out on location at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and you know how difficult it is to set anything up. And some of you, that's one of the things you're going to have to learn is to set up quickly. And to be a plein air painting, you have to be organized enough so that you can set up fast. But then what happens is that artists take out their sketchbooks and they start doing no-toms. And they spend a half an hour doing that, deciding what to paint on their canvas. And remember, we have the law of thirds, so you want to get that all together and have a good composition and all that. But it can get very, very stressful because what's happening is every 7 minutes your model is changing. Your light changes every 7 minutes. And Monet found that out, and he wrote about it. So every 7 minutes, your scene is changing. And a lot of people are so busy for the first half an hour doing no-toms, is that once they start looking up, they go, ah, it's not the same thing that I remember. And they spent their brain on this white sheet of paper trying to figure it out. And I think it has value. But I think it has value to learn how to see large masses of value. So what we want to do when we lay out a painting is we want to break the painting up into 4 separate values. So you'd say dark, light, middle, and middle. So you have like 4 to 5. And so how you determine that is to squint at your model, and you see the sky relationship to the mountain relationship to the middle ground relationship, the middle ground relationship to the foreground. And usually you can kind of see, if you really squint your eyes, it kind of takes away all the color and everything, and you can see these large masses. And so you'll have a large mass, a smaller mass, a smaller mass, and a smaller mass, and you break those up. And how you combine those masses creates an interesting composition. And we paint within those values. And it takes a little bit of practice. The one thing that I've adopted into my workshops is 20th century technology. So, now what I do, and of course a lot of plein air painters right now would just roll in their grave. But think about it, the first thing you do is you go out there and you see something you really like. And a lot of people, when I just see them in class and they bring their plein air sketches in, I go, do you have a photograph? And they go, yeah. I thought of it that afternoon and I went back and took a picture. Well, when they took a picture, it's a different scene than what they saw in the morning. So the first thing I recommend is to go out there and take a picture of what you want to snap. Okay? Plein air painters are screaming right now in my ear, no, don't show off that. This could be like the best kept secret ever, so just stick with me here. So, what you do is that you snap a picture. Then, the great thing about these cameras is that you can edit these pictures. And when you put it into edit, they have this neat little bar here that actually you can arrange to make a vertical or horizontal. It's actually a cropping tool. And when you put your finger on it, the law of thirds comes up.
Oh.
So you have third, 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 third. And then you can take that picture and do your no-toms. So you can blow that picture up and make it smaller. Now, I only suggest this for beginner painters. And the reason why I suggest it for beginner painters is because when you guys go outdoors, you see all of that. And you're trying to squeeze it into an 8x10, and it's very intimidating. But when all of a sudden you're looking at that and here, it's easier to take this little picture and fill up an 8x10 than it is to take that and push it down to a smaller size. Then you can play around. Once you get the little lines that show up, you can play around, move it around, and actually put the horizontal line, the vertical line. You can see where you want the center focal point should be within that middle third. You can move the picture around until you find out where you want that, and you make it smaller and you can make it bigger. Ooh.
Can you do that with the iPad too?
Mm-hmm. iPad, and even your other phones will do it too. If you don't have one of these, then you're out of luck. So anyway, so once you find out what you want, you just push done. Push the word done, and that becomes your new cropped image. So now you go, okay, so the seconds have gone by, and you're looking at the original photo, not at the scene now changing. And then what you do is you very quickly draw your sketch from this. Don't even look out there, just put a few notes from this, because here you'll be able to see the different variations of values and colors and drawing and see how you could squeeze it in. And for some of you today, that was a big breakthrough, because all of a sudden you could squeeze that in. And Molly even said, oh my God, I even made that smaller when I looked at my camera and saw how small it had to be, and it still wasn't even small enough. It's hard to get the world onto that little canvas, and when you're in the Grand Canyon, you're going to thank me, because everything is so much smaller than you think it is. So when you go backwards like this, then these cameras come with an option that turn everything into values. And it actually says in no time, on my camera, it's the iPhone, it will have a no time button, and you can break it down to 5 values, 4 values, 3 values. It will actually break it down, and you can push the button on it, and it will show you the different value scales. So then now you can actually see, and this is all for you to learn, because when I'm talking about value scales, I know you're sitting there going, what does that mean? So at least the camera will turn everything into black and white, and you can see value chunks. See what's light, you can see what's not so light, you can see what's darker, and then you can see what's darkest. And you could choose 4 values, 5 values, 6. We usually, as paintings, we want 4 to 5 values. And then you can look at that and look at your scene and go, oh, that's what he's talking about. I can see it now, because you can see it on your phone. So now you have a heads up to the different value scales. And then pretty much at that point, you can put your phone away, because we are doing plein air painting. And once you start off with a good drawing and you have an idea of how to break down the values, you're home free. Now you can sit and start painting. Now, as you know, after 2 or 3 hours, the scene changes, and you might be grateful that you have that beginning shot of when you were inspired. Now, you've got to watch out before you start, though, because you were doing the Moses syndrome, walking around with your easel going, not here, not there. And for 30 minutes, you were looking for the ideal spot.
It's overwhelming.
It is overwhelming. So you don't want to get caught up in that trap. Because what happens is that as the day changes, what you thought was really great then is going to change. Overall, when you step out there, you go, oh, this is beautiful. And if that's beautiful, that's all you need to paint. You don't need to wander around for perfection. And as artists, we can move things around also. So if all of a sudden you see this beautiful tree on the left, you can kind of bring it into your composition if you feel like that's necessary. Sargent would just sit down in the middle of a field and look for someplace that's comfortable, because he knew he would stand there or sit there for a while. And then he'd open up all of his umbrellas and things and get his paints out, and then he'd look up. And whatever was there is what he painted.
He found lots of people out there too, which was cool.
Well, he went out with groups of people and stuff. But he figured as an artist, you should be able to make anything look good. So it's not about finding the ideal spot and making that into a painting. It's about taking anything and making it into a work of art, and that's why it takes practice. Now, one thing that I was telling you this morning, it's like, oh, it's the first time you've been out. You've been painting for 3 months. You go, oh, this is so hard. And then you wanted to wipe it off.
Yeah.
But the thing is, and you were saying I was mean to her.
No, I was, you know what, I tease you back as much as you tease, so you
I know.
just don't.
I know.
And
But then I told her, I said, yeah, it is hard. It is, I was agreeing with her. And and she said, oh, it's horrible. I said, yeah, it is.
I'm wiping mine off though, and I'm gonna sit out there this afternoon.
Go do that. But this is how you're gonna try it again. But the thing is, then what I did was I sat down and I changed things. But one thing I want to get, and we'll get into our painting next, because Anne's sitting here going, let's get to our paintings. I was teaching plein air painting for 10 years. I painted for 15 years outdoors. After 15 years of painting outdoors and teaching plein air painting, I did my first really good painting.
Wow.
That's how hard this is.
I feel a lot better.
You feel a lot better. If you think you can go out on a weekend and come back with a really good painting, you're just kidding yourself. It takes practice, it takes practice, it takes practice. And it's a skill you lose if you don't practice. And so if you're not out there practicing all the time, then you lose it. And so you guys grabbed a hold of a little bit of it, and I would suggest some of you to come together, and since it's a beautiful time of year, to practice a little bit, because you will get better with practice. The first thing that you want to make sure that you have on your palette, first thing is fresh paints. I can't tell you how frustrating it is for me as a teacher to sit down and go with a $30 brush and stab it into a pile of hard paint, expecting it to be soft, and there goes 30 bucks because you wanted to save some paint. Paint's cheap, start off fresh. Richard Schmidt cleans his palette completely 3 or 4 times in one setting, throwing away everything. Because if it's on your palette, it's going to find its way onto the painting. Make sure you have a red, yellow, and blue. I have people that have yellow and green out on their palette and white, and they're sitting there going, I can't get the color. I'm like, well, you only have yellow and green out. What do you expect? You can't mix anything with that. So get your colors out that you think you need, do them fresh, be prepared. Have good, clean brushes. I can't tell you how many people today were not even prepared with good, clean brushes. If you're going to paint outdoors, you've got to be prepared, because it is the hardest thing you'll ever do. Well, you've got a really good thing now. One thing I was telling Becky is that in shadows, when you're doing plein air painting, you want to, when in doubt, leave it out. So that's one rule that you've got to think about when you're doing plein air painting. You have to think twice about it, don't paint it. Becky was talking about, but it's all that detail you don't see as detail at a glance. And oftentimes, if you're trying to figure out what is it that we're looking for when we're doing plein air painting, imagine driving by something at 80 miles an hour. Okay, that's about as much detail as you see. And so anything else is added detail. So some of you are dinking around putting in all the leaves, but when it comes right down to it, you only see very little in a short space. In the shadow areas, you see less or almost no detail at all. In the highlight areas, you don't see detail either. The light cancels out a lot of the detail. And you have to understand some of these principles when you're painting outdoors. This is the reason why it took me so long to learn how to paint outdoors, because nobody was painting outdoors when I was teaching. And I had students that would be putting in lots and lots of detail, and I go, God, that really looks crappy. I'd use another word, but Molly's here. She always texts me and says, use that language, something coming. But anyway, so it looks crappy. But the thing is, I would practice and I would practice. No, I love you. So I would practice. And with practice, I realized that in the highlight areas, there's no detail. In the shadow areas, there's no detail. The only place for detail is where, Becky?
In the middle ground.
In the transition. And where else? What else do we find in the middle ground?
The true color.
The true color, which is called?
I forget the name of that.
Local color.
What is it?
Local color.
Local color.
Yeah. So the local color is between the shadow and the highlight. It's in the transition. And so she's got an orange shirt on. So where the light was hitting the orange, it wasn't orange, it was more the color of the sun. The shadowed orange was actually more of a brown. Had nothing to do with orange. The only place she saw orange was just in between the two colors. So we have light, which is actually influenced by the light. The shadows are kind of influenced by the shadows and more complicated. And then we have the local color, which is in between. When you end up with a painting that is this vivid and green, you have too much color in the highlighter shadow. So this is really, really vivid right now. So your highlight colors could have been a little bit
You don't
wider.
like vivid?
I like vivid,
Okay.
but some people don't. But it's really like, but the thing is, green's one of those colors. It's
I know.
I like green. Anyway, so the green's got to be a little bit softer. The shadow color in the sap green, or this greenish color in here that you've got, that's also really green. That could have been toned down a bit with a little bit of earth color. Okay? So that would be take away some of the green. Now when you're doing greens, the key to controlling your greens is always work with reds. And that's when I get really upset, because one of the reds that I like to see on your palette is alizarin crimson. And it's a good complementary color. Why do we have that color out if we're painting a green painting? And that's what most of you don't realize, is that you look across the lawn and you go, all I see is green. So you squeeze out yellow and blue and green and white, and then you sit there and you wonder, why is my painting out of control? And I go, so you don't have red. You have to have red, yellow, and blue. You can't just have yellow and blue. You have to have the red. Why? Red's a complementary color to green. When we add a complementary color to green, it tones it down.
So you're
Glaze it
mixing
down.
the red into the green. You're mixing the.
Yeah, you mix the red into the green, and that knocks it down so it's not so vivid.
Would you use the alizarin crimson?
I like
Is it
alizarin
really
crimson because
cool?
it's the most unintrusive. And another thing too, this is one thing I pointed out to Ann. Now Ann's pretty good at painting outdoors.
She's gonna
So,
paint, period.
she's,
Yes.
or a little story.
I don't love a lot of it, but.
So yeah, you've done quite a bit. But the thing is, what I was telling her is, if you have a walkway and you have the lawn side by side, you don't put these sky holes, these highlight holes, on the lawn separate than the walkway. So in other words, the walkway is not dark and the lawn is light, just because there's a line there between the cement and the lawn. So if you've got a light hole or light coming and hitting the lawn next to the walkway, it's good to highlight the walkway in that space too, so it looks like that light goes across that. And so that will make your paintings look really amateurish if you don't connect the two. So she went back and she kind of connected them so they work a little bit better. You see the shadow, shadow, highlight, 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 shadow, shadow. So she got a little bit better with that. Beautiful, nice, cool color. Now, some of the paintings we looked at, and this is why I let some students go and do their own thing. They go, well, I don't want to paint the background like that. I don't want to have a background wall. I just want to paint. And the problem with that is when you are a plein air painting, you kind of have to paint the scene the way it is. Because if you start changing it, it becomes something different. And the goal behind plein air painting, if anything else, is to walk out of there with something that relatively is close to what you're doing. So if we equate this with golf, nailing the scene that's in front of you is a hole-in-one. Getting kind of close is, I don't know what they say, a birdie or
Par.
an eagle or a par, or, but nothing beats a hole-in-one. So that when I tell you it took me 15 years to learn plein air painting, I did a lot of good paintings, but it took me 15 years to get to the hole-in-one where I left there with exactly what was in front of me. And it was in one of the most complicated places, even worse, Mesa Verde, looking down at all that perspective in the caves, with all those buildings. Yeah, that was hard. That was hard. And I was on a platform that was 10 feet by 8 feet with people. So what were you thinking?
Oh, man. I just love the trees and the little house, but it was not easy.
So what she actually ended up doing is that, this is the house that's across the river that you can barely see into. And she just kind of flew like a phoenix across that river and painted a close-up of that. And then Molly said that after she looked at it in the camera, she had to make it smaller. So you can imagine how big she actually had it. Thank God she kind of took that moment, because what's really pretty is the setting. So
Double.
you had to double the size.
Oh, wow.
So oftentimes you can actually just say, I want to paint that thing way out there and bring it forward. That's okay. That's fine. But you don't want to be at a place where you're painting a thing. Remember, we don't paint things. If she painted it any bigger, it would be a painting of a house. So we want to paint the setting, we want to paint the effects. And so what's really beautiful is how that house situates in that space. Beautiful colors. Notice the soft values in the background. As things go further away from you, they get softer.
Reflection.
The reflections are nice. All of these trees in here are scratched and rubbed out. Remember I was talking about using Q-tips? Remember I said if you see somebody having Q-tips and you don't have any, go over and give them compliments. And, wow, your painting is really beautiful. Oh, by the way, you got some Q-tips I can borrow? Always remember to compliment first.
Mom, that was with the Q-tip or was it with the?
Wipeout tool.
Yeah, so do you have your wipeout tool?
Uh-huh. I don't have it with me.
Okay, so the wipeout tool is actually a stick that has a little rubber tip. And it's a handy little tool they have in your outdoor room.
You find them in the sculpting section of an art store.
Yeah. Oftentimes, when I don't have one of those rubber tips, I have a pink pearl. And I use my pink pearl. And
Pink
this is-
pearl what?
Eraser. What else is a pink pearl? You're as old as I am. You remember pink pearls. It's the thing we used to chew on in second grade.
Yeah, my mom told me not to put stuff in my
Huh?
mouth.
I never really call it.
Those pink erasers?
Yeah,
Must be a
pink pearl.
Yeah.
They're pink
It
pearls.
says right on there.
Now you oversimplified the trees because they're a little bit more interesting and pretty. And when you're out there painting, Jan, when you're out there painting, it's all about actually capturing the subject as close as possible. And the only reason why you're worried about that is so that you can learn to see what's there so you can add it into your paintings later. Now, why are we painting outdoors? We're not painting outdoors necessarily to come up with a painting that we want to sell. The reason why we paint outdoors is because we want to become better painters. And how do we become better painters? We become better observers. We observe things closely and we learn about them. Right, Jan?
Right.
That big tree in the foreground? Don't simplify things. Look at them. Because what makes those trees beautiful over there is that they don't look like apple trees. Yours kind of look like apple trees. There are these wonderful old ladies that are just, and they're dead. And they're dying. It's like your grandma. All of those wrinkles she's earned, and every one of them makes a beautiful person. Every one of those branches, all of that, it's going to be gone. 2 years from now, those trees are going to be gone. But you have an opportunity to learn how a eucalyptus tree looks when it's dead. The beautiful branches and how those branches fold. So even if you're out there painting outdoors, you're actually there to pay homage to nature and learn to see the subtleties and the interesting effects. That way you become a better painter altogether. And everything you need is right in front of you. And so these trees are a little bit simplistic. Beautiful effect of water. First time out, I would give yourself an A. Good job. Okay. Diddy. And since I was chewing Jan out. So that's, what's interesting is that your painting looks like red. And your painting looks like Jamaica. And you're only like 10 feet apart from each other.
You're making me crazy, huh, Molly?
Huh?
You're making me crazy.
Jamaica me crazy.
Dog.
Jamaica me crazy.
That's the name of our dog. Registered name.
So anyway, so Jan said, I don't want to paint the background mountains. I want to kind of, and that's great, but now it looks like the ocean.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Doesn't it? Does that look like it'd be the ocean back there? And then she did all these plants that were in front, they were like that. But in that setting, it looks like Jamaica. And then she kind of simplified the tree, and I go, oh no, Jan, It's a beautiful look. You got to really kind of play that out. So she gave us some of that drama, that trait. We don't get the sense of depth in here because your values are too dark in there. And I can't stress the values. Now when you go outdoors to paint, you see an area of green. We have a tendency to want to just kind of go in and paint it green because we're looking at it. But none of you are looking at the green in comparison to the green that's in the front. If you want to know the value of something, you got to look at that lawn, stare at it, and then compare it to what's in front. And you'll notice what's in front is even greener than that. And so what you're seeing out there is a siren. She's calling out to you saying, paint me green. Paint me green. And it's for us plein air painters to go, no, you're not green. I'm not going there. Because in comparison to the green that's in the front here, you're more gray. Now sit down and shut up and gray out. So gray that out in there. Get it further back so that we have this in the foreground, that in the background. Notice your foreground foliage is the same color as your background green. You don't get depth that way. Remember, as things get further away from you, they get lighter in value and cooler in color. So everything looked the same. So you didn't know how, it was just all so beautiful. You're overwhelmed by the beauty. You didn't know how to pick. Well, we don't pick anything. We choose. We don't pick things, because picking is like, you pick fruit. You pick lottery numbers. Choosing is like, in a lottery, you choose number 13. You choose number 10. But if you pick them, you just like pick. Choose. Why is this important? Because a lot of times when you're painting out there, especially if you've been painting for a few hours, you have no central focal point. So at that point, you can't sit and pick around anymore. You've got to choose and say, that's where I want my central focal point is. That's where my brightest point is in the painting. That's the thing. Remember, we don't paint things. That's the effect that I want to get. Everything out in nature is a variation of gray. So what we think is brown is actually a variation of gray. What we think is green is a variation of gray.
I don't get that. I don't get that.
Me neither.
I can't see.
When you see the background trees back there, when you see the background trees in the distance, the other side of the river.
Yeah, I can see
Gray.
that for
Okay,
gray.
that's
But
gray.
not vivid
That's
greens
gray.
up close.
No. If you compare those vivid greens to the greens in front of you, you'll notice that they're grayed down. And if I tell you everything's a variation of gray, look for the gray. You won't go into the distance here. Now there are times when you will. You'll go, no, that's brown. And you'll put that in, but that's like the odd thing. If you keep your paintings in variations of gray, you'll have some control over it. Now, trust me on this. Because when I was 12, my mother signed me up for a plein air painting class. And we were in Lake Tahoe, and we were painting this wonderful scene. And everybody got that we were looking at a variation of gray, but I showed up a little late for that class because I was bowling. And I wanted to be a bowler, not a painter, so I decided I was going to bowl that way. So when I showed up, I missed that talk. So I ended up with a painting that was known infamously as the Bad Dreaming Green. I know what I'm talking about. I lived there. I was there. It was so bad that it was the talk of Lake Tahoe. Those gals who took that workshop there talked about it for years. It took me, I had to move away from Lake Tahoe to get away from that reputation.
I mean, you were 12. How
I was
many of
12.
them?
My mom said she will never pay for an art class again. She says, that's it. And I go, good, I can go bowling. Okay, so anyway, so you want to make sure that you say variations of gray. Really beautiful observations. My biggest problem with your painting today is you spent way too much time wandering around looking for a perfect place.
Just choose.
Just choose something. Sit down and choose something, look up and paint. Okay, because I don't think you found a better place to paint than what everyone else did.
Because she painted it very well.
She painted it very well, but you took half, the amount of time until you finally settled down and painted, we should have been already out of there. Most plein air painting locations are 2 hours long. That's how quick. That's why I say don't waste your time doing no-tons. You could go practice no-tons so that you know how to see value out there, but don't waste that time doing no-tons. This is a no-ton zone. Use your cameras. 20th century, and they go, well, that's not very fair. The old masters didn't use, it's like how integritous are you by using your camera? And I go, well, most of the old masters didn't drive to their locations, they used horses.
They didn't have electric lights.
And they didn't have electric lights. I mean, come on now. They didn't have YouTube to find out how to paint.
They're dead.
And they're dead!
Okay, moving right along here. Was it painting over painting over?
Yeah, so one of the biggest mistakes I saw when you started is that you had another painting the other direction. And you were kind of lost until I said, okay, get that sky in there so at least we can start establishing what your highlight value is. Because when you're doing plein air painting, it's about determining what your lightest light and your darkest dark are, and then you try to fill them up. So what we want to do in painting like this is if you have a brown background. And that's why I'm not a big fan for people to go stain your canvases before you go outdoors to paint. Now,
I thought you told us to do that.
no,
That's just for our studio starting.
you can, but it's not like a, and especially you don't want that too dark. So sometimes I'll say stain your canvases and they come back all dark.
Okay.
No, so we want to go lighter. The reason why we went and stained the canvases for the TV show, if you watch my TV show, is because digital cameras don't like white, can't focus on it. And so we had to stain it, so that was a technical issue. But people go, well, you do it, and I go, no, I did it for the cameras. But anyway, so beautiful job, a little bit garish in color here again too. Those greens back there needed to be reserved for these greens here. In fact, if you look at it, your greens here are lighter than the ones back there. So it could have been a little bit lighter value. These houses back here are villas.
It looks very French to me.
I know, they look
It's
very
just
French.
really
And the
nice.
thing is, if you heard him talk, he said, well, I like painting houses and they're a little more extravagant because that's the way I like it. That's the way they should be.
Yes.
If you see villas back there and you see hot air balloons, then by all means, paint what, I mean, because ultimately, it's not about whether or not you get it right or wrong, it's whether or not you had a good time. Didn't you have a good time today?
Yeah.
You got to have camaraderie. I think plein air paintings become more of a social thing. Because, sitting in the studio can be very lonely. And what has really made plein air painting popular, in fact, if you go on Craigslist, you'll see a lot of meetup groups for plein air painters. It's a social thing. So anyway, very nice. I like, you have one that's more dominant than the other, and if you're going to go off and build structures that are bigger than life, then you just got to make sure that you get them proportionally to what they would be if they were built. So these windows are a little bit too big for probably 3 or 4 floors high. You have a tower like that. I love the way you painted the slant. I wish it wasn't coming out of the frame. I wish it were a little bit shorter. Probably could have a little bit of a walkway to bring a little bit more of a romantic feeling in the front. Now, if you would have done what I told you to do with your camera ahead of time and actually spend a minute trying to see what the painting should look like.
I couldn't see it. I
Yeah.
couldn't see it well enough. So.
Yeah, you really kind of have to have that vision. And I think ultimately that's the most important part when you start a painting. You've got to have a vision of the finished product. What's crucial on setting up a painting when you go out on location? First thing, you're going to go out on location, you're going to see how beautiful things are in the morning. And you're going to see how ugly they are at the afternoon. Most plein air paintings fail in the first 10 minutes. One is that you have to see what's in front of you and actually envision what it would look like in a frame on the wall. I mean, you're not thinking that far ahead, did you? Did you think about the color of frame that you were going to put on your painting? And where it was going to hang in your house? If you can see that image, and you can see what you're looking at finished like that, then you truly have mastered plein air painting because you'll know what you're shooting for. And snapping a picture and doing that at the front is helping in that process. especially for beginner painters, because you haven't painted paintings outdoors before. So how would you know what it would look like when you're done? And how do you get to that point? You practice lots. 15 years. You have a whole basement full of bad dreams and green.
We're on our way.
We're on our way. Remember, most painters that you see out there that are painting, they're imposters. They're pretending that how they're painting is the way that they were born. She gets it. The artists that you see out there painting, the artists that you see in Plein Air magazine, all the artists that you see out there in galleries that you go, oh, you're so marvelous. You look at these marvelous painters that are doing all the competitions, you think, they're so great, I wish I could be like them. But I'm not, because I'm just painting ugly plein air paintings that suck. They're too gray, they're too this. But what I'm telling you is that all of those artists are imposters, because you're taking a look at them 10 years after they've done a lot of crap. And they won't show you what's in their basement or what's under their bed, all the crappy paintings that didn't turn out. In fact, it is really normal to paint a lot of crappy paintings for years. I admitted it myself. 15 years, lots of crap. Lots of horrible paintings. Lots of paintings that pop up in thrift shops that go, did you paint this painting? I go, God, I thought that was dead. All those artists out there are imposters because they won't admit that painting outdoors is really, really hard, and it takes a lot of practice to get there. It's an incredible amount of skill. And get that, they build museums for people like us because it's so hard. And some of you go, oh, it's too hard, I don't want to do this. It's like, well, that's why it makes it special. They don't build museums to house golfers. You don't see the Louvre have a golf wing, right? But you see them having a wing on artists who paint outdoors. You see them for people who paint sergeants who went out and painted Venice on location and did it well. They built a whole, because that's freaky weird. It's so hard to do that. You guys are amazing that you could get this far. And you can't judge your work against anyone else's. You have your own path to go. And a lot of your ugly paintings are just stepping stones for you to get to where you want to go. Don't get upset if you mess up. Say, thank you, I know what not to do. Next time I'll go again. And then every once in a while, you get a little moment of clarity. And it might be just a transitional color that's just perfect between two shadows. And you go, I got that. I saw that in Becky today. She just all of a sudden go, and that one little moment of clarity, you have now learned one thing. So you have 10,000 more to go. Because it takes 10,001 experiences like that to paint a really good plein air painting. So now you have 10,000 more experiences to go through where you get a moment of clarity. And after doing 10 years of plein air painting, you may be able to be that good. You'll be better than anyone else. But a lot of people drop off in the process because it's too hot, it's too cold, I'm not good enough, I'm too old, I hear them all. Best way to learn how to plein air paint is just practice and go out there and do it again and again and again.